That's great. Well, first of all, thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. My name is Matt Prescott. I'm a team lead within the design and placemaking team at MHCLG, and within my remit in particular is some of the work we're doing around design, practice, and implementation, which included the Design Code Pathfinders program. So today, I just want to talk you through a few things, just to give you, I guess, a bit of context, and talk about some of the findings that we took from that program. Um, so today's session as a whole will be looking at the monitoring and updating of codes. So we did host some earlier sessions around pre-adoption matters, post-adoption matters, and this is sort of the final topic within that series. A few of the things I just want to talk about today, a brief reminder of what design codes are in this context, talk you through some of the design legislation, policy, and guidance that's coming forward and is in place, as well as then concluding around our testing programs, that being the NMDC testing program and the Design Code Pathfinders program, and what we were able to draw out of that piece of work. So to begin with, what are design codes? So as set out in the National Model Design Code, page 1, a design code is a set of simple, concise, illustrated design requirements that are visual and numerical wherever possible to provide specific detailed parameters for the physical development of a site or area. So they will allow for binary decision making with language like musts and wills. And through setting out specific parameters, they're intended to give greater clarity and certainty to users of the planning system, including applicants, local planning authorities, and communities about the design expectations for an area. Now, they're different from design guides. Design guides are documents providing guidance on how a development can be carried out in accordance with good design practice, and will typically use language like shoulds and coulds. But it's important to recognize that design codes can include elements of guidance, particularly where it's obviously not possible or appropriate to code at a particular scale or for a particular type of design matter. In this context, design codes are LPA-led. So by that, I mean they're produced by the local planning authority and given appropriate weight within the decision-making process, such as through a local plan or a supplementary planning document. And the final thing to note on design codes is just that they can apply at a variety of different scales, as signified by the graphic here on the screen, which is taken from the NMDC. So that ranging from local authority scale down through to site-specific, and then even down to a plot-by-plot basis. So turning now to design policy and guidance. So good design and placemaking has experienced elevated status in national policy and practice in recent years. So this includes through the changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, which has strengthened design quality primarily through Chapter 12, which is around achieving well-designed places. And this explains how design should influence plan making and decision taking. It makes clear that development that is not well designed should be refused, especially where it fails to accord with national or local design policy. And it also encourages that local planning authorities should prepare design codes or design guides locally to maximize clarity around design expectations. And in lieu of local design codes or design guidance, the NPPF makes clear that the national design guidance should be used to inform planning decisions locally. So the NPPF is supplemented by our national design guidance. That includes the National Design Guide and the National Model Design Code. The National Design Guide sets out 10 characteristics of well-designed places, and the National Model Design Code sets out the process for preparing a design code and how those 10 characteristics can be translated into a design code and implemented locally. I should also highlight as well that there is additional planning practice guidance on design, that being the design process and tools, which provides further guidance on integrating design in plan making, tools to support decision taking, and also the role of community engagement in the design process. And I just wanted to finish here just reminding about some of the provisions that came forward through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, those being the new plan making framework and the introduction of supplementary plans, and it is anticipated that design codes, as they come forward, will come forward as part of the development plan, including as a supplementary plan. Next, I just wanted to touch on some of the changes that have been made by the Labour government since they came into power last year. So, first and foremost, just to highlight that in their manifesto, the government did stress the importance of good design, saying that good design, exemplary development should be the norm and not the exception. In July 2024, the government consulted on changes to the NPPF. So updates were made in December, including to remove references to beauty and beautiful when assessing development proposals, as this is open to subjectivity, while retaining beauty as a strategic objective of the planning system. And then they also, as part of that consultation, proposed to drop the requirement for LPAs to prepare codes at their spatial scales. So what is known as an authority-wide code, and that instead code should focus on areas of greatest potential for change through local plans. I'm sure many of you will be aware that the consultation response came out and showed that these proposals were broadly supported. The respondents did highlight the need for further support for LPAs to help with preparing codes, and also to still encourage the use of authority-wide codes where these are appropriate alongside other design tools. And we will be reflecting on that feedback as we progress with other design policy and guidance. The other thing to note here is last year, in a written ministerial statement, government committed to updating the National Design Guidance. So these are proposed to better help local areas identify what good design means for them and to put in place tools and processes for delivery. So the National Design Guide will be updated to provide guidance on well-designed places, as well as on processes, tools, and on how to integrate design into decision-making. And this will include proposals to condense the 10 characteristics as they currently stand into 7 features. And then the National Model Design Code, we're proposing to be called a Model Design Code, which will provide much clearer guidance about the type of things that you can code for and at the scales that they might be appropriate to apply. And updates to that National Design Guidance are planned for later this spring. The government has also brought forward proposals around new towns. So the government has published the Principles Building New Towns for the Future in February, which includes principles around community engagement, long-term stewardship, well-connected, healthy, safe and balanced communities. And the New Towns Task Force are working on how these can be implemented. And we would expect new town development to align with the updated National Design Guidance. So design is a core part of that particular program as well. And also just to highlight brownfield passports, a working paper was consulted on last year around supporting development of brownfield land in urban areas. And we're currently reviewing the responses to consider what design requirements could be set for higher density development in well-connected locations. So next, I just want to talk you through the testing programs that we've been conducting for the past few years. So I'm sure many of you will be aware, in 2021, we set up the NMDC pilot, where we worked with 14 local authorities in a variety of areas to test out the process and content of the NMDC and just to check how it could work in a variety of different local contexts. This was followed then by the Design Code Pathfinders program, and phase 2 of that program, of the testing program, was conducted in 22-23. Where we worked with 25 local areas and asked them to prepare a design code over the course of a year. And those pathfinders had the opportunity to choose the scale at which to code, as well as the actual content of the code and what was of greatest importance to them and their local area. The following year, we then conducted phase 3 of the Pathfinders program, where we continued to work with 20 pathfinders to understand experience with a variety of things. So that was refining codes, so the importance of testing, removing requirements, strengthening requirements, improving visuals, optimizing codes usability. We also worked with a handful of them around implementing and monitoring their codes, so understanding the role of training, how codes have been adopted and integrated within decision-making processes, and also how the performance of codes is being tracked and monitored. And then we also work with a small group around the digitalization of codes, which I know is of great interest to a number of people here. And that was focusing on different approaches to digitalization and really starting to understand some of the barriers that different areas might face when trying to implement a digital design code. Now, at this point, so when we started phase three, there were several areas who were at the point of adopting their design codes or had already adopted. And this gave us a really good opportunity to understand how codes were working in practice, to start to understand some of those impacts, and ultimately to help fill a gap in the existing resources, which typically covered the preparation process, but didn't necessarily go into much detail about actually using codes in practice. So some of the key findings we took from this latest phase of the program, phase three, was that there were certain characteristics which were more difficult to code for, those being identity, built form, resources, and movement. Testing is critical, especially to support with refining codes and optimizing usability. Half of the pathfinders took steps to improve usability by reducing the length of their codes, strengthening language, so introducing musts, and also through improving the use of visuals. In terms of the number of applications they were testing their codes against, most pathfinders tested codes against between 1 and 5 applications, and 8 of the 18 that we surveyed at the end of the program undertook a code breaking exercise. So ultimately, sort of testing the code to its limits, implying, I think, that more guidance is probably needed just to support authorities with sort of adequately testing their codes during the preparation process. An interesting finding was certainly that two pathfinders were, in terms of compliance, pathfinders were looking for full compliance with their codes. Others were allowing justified departures, some looking at a threshold for compliance, so sort of 70%, 80%, and one also saying that they would judge on a case-by-case basis. 8 pathfinders were using design review, with another 3 intending to do so as a way to inform planning decisions around design. So this includes in instances where the planning proposals put forward would depart from the requirements of a code. I guess of particular importance to today's session is the minority of pathfinders had plans in place for monitoring their design codes, with 8 pathfinders out of the 18 having a process or systems in place for long-term monitoring. And again, I think this largely reflects a bit of a gap in the existing guidance in terms of what, when, and how you could go about monitoring design codes. But I think one of the most important and positive findings we've taken from phase three is that codes are having a positive impact, and they are providing benefits, with 15 of the 18 surveyed saying that their codes were having a positive impact even before adoption. So pathfinders were saying that their codes were helping to ensure design matters were considered and resolved earlier in the applications process, speeding up decisions in some cases, but overall, generally, they were improving the quality of planning applications which came forward. In terms of development management, I just thought I'd pick out some of the sort of key findings in relation to DM and design coding. So some of the lessons include that DM officers were key to establishing the focus and content of codes, identifying the appropriate scope, and zeroing in on common application problems experienced by DM teams. So DM officers were also valuable when onboarding consultants, supporting a clear brief and helping to target the right expertise. And 16 of the 18 Pathfinders surveyed in phase three involved their DM teams in procurement. For this reason, it is desirable to have multidisciplinary in-house teams, including representation from DM or someone with DM experience. This can help you understand DM processes and align priorities to inform code development and implementation. As I mentioned in the last slide as well, testing is crucial to further refine and optimize usability, noting that DM teams are a key user group, and 16 of the 18 Pathfinders surveyed claimed that the endorsement of DM team leaders was critical to securing DM officer engagement throughout sort of the preparation of the design code. Testing itself could involve the use of compliance tools and checklists, though it's important to understand what works best for your DM colleagues. And 12 of the 18 Pathfinders said that they would be introducing a compliance checklist, in part because their DM teams suggested that that would make the process easier to implement. In terms of training, it's also essential to not only familiarize DM teams with the content of a design code, but also how it fits into the decision-making process. I think this also links through to how they actually go about monitoring the code as well, and supporting that through the decision-making process. And then finally on this, another real positive was that Pathfinders have said that design codes have given their development management officers much more confidence to refuse development, which wasn't meeting their expectations for design, or giving them greater confidence to request that changes were made to be in line with what the code was requiring. And I think just to conclude here, I wanted to highlight for those who might not be aware that there are a range of learning materials from the Pathfinder program available on the Design Council website. We worked with them as part of phase 2 of the program, and again as part of phase 3, where they're able to update the roadmap for code production, but also provide a range of new materials, filling some of the gaps that were present following the conclusion of phase 2. So that covers things like engaging with development management teams and wider council disciplines, implementation monitoring, supporting the preparation of usable codes, how to make most efficient use of resourcing, and yes, finally, collaboration, as I said, with other council disciplines. So the link is there if you wanted to access those resources, and I'll be happy to post that in the chat as well. And I think with that, thank you very much for listening.